my mouth. The second time, I go backward, arms wheeling on both sides of me as I fall. I let out a scream that's nothing compared to what comes out when I land, flattening my foot between my ass and the ground. It is a primitive sound, all rage and pain, one that seals the forest around me. Everything knows that something big just got hurt, and like most small animals, they know their best bet is to keep quiet and lie low. There's a wetness spreading on my rear end, and it's not cold groundwater. It's warm, and the full, heavy scent of blood reaches me a moment later. Shit, I say up to the sky as black circles start forming in my vision. I can't pass out, so instead I pick one and name the shapes it becomes as it travels. Fish, bear, buzzard. Screw that, I'll call it an eagle. I can't look at my foot, not yet. For one thing, I'm pretty sure my head isn't ready for me to sit up. For another, the silence has swallowed me, the self-protective quiet of the woods reminding me of Duke's house. My house was more welcoming, but also smaller, and the two of us couldn't hope for a lick of privacy, even if Dad was sleeping. Duke was too terrified to touch me at home, but I can't really blame him for, since his older brother reportedly has an ass full of buckshot from the first and last time he got into Kate Fullerton's pants. I can't imagine how Dad would have reacted if he'd caught me and Duke going at it, but I can say it wouldn't have been pretty or kind. So we went to his place most of the time instead. There was a higher chance of a kid wandering in on us, sure, but he also had a basement and a mom that slapped his ass and told him to wear a condom every time we went down there. We didn't have to worry about being quiet because upstairs was nothing short of a zoo. Duke had 5 younger siblings, and every one of them had an opinion about what the others should or should not be doing at any given time. There was constant shouting, chasing, and fighting over toys, occasionally overshadowed by the youngest screaming that she needed her diaper change. She always yelled, "Shit!" real loud, no matter what was actually in it. But I heard lots of good things too, like one brother offering to fix his sister's doll when her head popped off, or the older girl changing the little one's pants because their mom had gone into the yard to talk on the phone. Noise wasn't always a bad thing there, just a constant. So when it stopped, we always knew his dad had come home. He wasn't a big guy, so we never heard his footsteps. It was the silence that spread out around him, like all the words floating around the kids had been sucked into him, leaving nothing behind. Duke, hey Clyde. Duke would tense beside me, and I'd hear the younger ones go to their rooms, doors closing behind them until dinner time, which would be soon, because their mom didn't dare bring it to the table a minute late. It's like that now, here in the woods. I've just scared the daylights out of every living thing, and it's the rage that they heard in me that's making them stay hid. Sorry, I say quietly, then lick my lips. The truth is, I got no business being out here. I'm way off trail and in their territory, breaking brush and leaving blood and swear words behind me. I'm the scary thing in their house whose arrival brings quiet and hiding, hoping that they're not the one to catch its eye. I don't want to ever be that to anybody or anything, so I nearly bite through my tongue to keep quiet as I get up. My foot slipped out of the sling, so my leg straightens out, the knee going back to a place it hasn't been all day. It hurts. That hurts, and my foot hurts, and I know it's going to get worse before it gets better. But for now, I've got one goal, and that's water. I make it down to the stream, stumbling in and landing on all fours. It's so cold, it takes my breath, the numbness working up past my wrist before I'm able to scramble into a rock. I flex my fingers, forcing the blood to flow back through their deadened tips when I get smart and stick my foot in the water. There's the shock of the pain first, water flowing into my foot and touching places that have never seen light. Dad always said if there's a way in, water will find it. Something I usually hear when there was yet another leak in our roof, adding a new stain to our ceiling. I don't think he quite had the inside of his daughter's foot in mind when he said it, but damn, it's true. Crushed nerves are drawn in the cold, screaming at the exposure, then slowly deadening. I lean forward once it's fully numb, willing the same feeling into my thoughts as I peel back to the bloodied sleeve to take a look. My bones are a glossy white, like teeth poking through the gummy meat that surrounds them. I can't even call it a wound, really. It's a mashed mess of nerves and tendon and muscle. I've dressed enough deer in my life to know what it's in there, and I can't even begin to sort it out. But under the moving water, it's got kind of a beauty to it, something I can appreciate now that the pain is lessened. The water creates the illusion of movement, and I can almost imagine my toes are twitching, which means some things are still intact in there. I pull my foot out of the current, the sun warmed heat of the rock pleasant against the naked arch. Carefully, I slip the t shirt bandage off my foot and pry around to see if I can get a sense of the damage. I press a little here, more firmly there, wondering if I'll be able to tell the difference if a bone is broken or not. I'm down near the base of my two smallest toes when the slightest pressure from my fingers undoes all the good the cold did me. I can't even cry out. It hurts so bad, taking the wind right out of me, just like Duke's dad does to his whole family. I make a weak gasp and clutch the side of the rock to keep from going on over into the drink and end up drowned like some drunk dipshit. I stick my mangled bits back into the creek, let some of the pain subside before I look again. I don't fuck around, going right for the same spot that near killed me. I take a deep breath before I press down, and I'm not surprised to see a stream of pus leak out from under what's left of the skin. There we go. Something white coming out of you is only good if you're a boy. I've got an infection. There's stuff I can't eat out here. It's a question of if I've got the nerve to do it. Granted, I've had some things in my gut that maybe shouldn't have been there. A pot roast gone a day too long. The cockroach Meredith bet me $5 I wouldn't eat back in 6th grade. She did pay up. I can say a lot about that girl, but she's honest. I've never understood picky eaters, mostly because I've always just been happy to have something to eat. Growing up hungry has taught me a lot, and one of those lessons was not to question what's put in front of me. I remember one time Mom had something on the table I couldn't quite put a name to. I came in from the creek bed, muddied up to the knees, plopped down on a plate of warm food and said, "I'm not eating that." Dad had set down his knife and fork real quiet and said, "Then you're not hungry enough." I get it now. I get it because I just ate a worm. It happened toward the evening when I came across another bit of running water. I had to wash my underwear and jeans because I'm still bleeding. So I thought if I've got all that out to the breeze, I might as well take my bra off too. Part of me thought maybe if I did, my shit all lock would stay true to form and a group of hikers would show up. Or maybe a rescue chopper and a news crew. Nobody came. I stuck my foot in the water, mostly because I don't know what else to do about it, and leaned back against the bank, knocking loose a rock. It rolled down next to my hand, a big chunk of wet dirt stuck to the side, a maroon worm squirming like all get out. His world had shrunk so suddenly, I thought. A moment ago, he could have gone anywhere, tunneling across the state and into the next. Now he's turning this way and that, wondering why there's nowhere to go and nothing but air to touch and a little bit of mud holding him in place. And then that was gone too, because I crumbled it away and popped it in my mouth before I could think too hard about it. What's wrong, guys? Come here, baby. It moved in there, more curious than panic, touching the side of my cheek. I grabbed a handful of water and threw everything back, like a child learning to swallow a pill for the first time. Then another, and another. Creek water flowed down my chin until I felt my stomach opening up, taking in what I just offered. Way worse than anything Mom ever put in front of me. It hurts. I haven't had anything solid in my gut in 2 days. Every time I found water, I drank until I could hear it sloshing in my belly, so I'm not exactly empty, but this is different. This is my body waking back up again, realizing it has a job and that something needs to be digested. It's like starting a car that's been dead for a while, the engine not turning over. Everything grinding and putting up a fight because doing nothing is so much easier than doing something. That's what my body does, everything squeezing up tight in protest, not against the worm I put in my gut, but because there's anything in there at all. A little noise gets out of me, a sigh of acquiescence, and I think I'm in working order. I lean back again, a sheen of sweat cooling across my brow, and then, dear God, I belch. I'm trying not to think about Davy Beat. That's hard because the only reason I'm not getting rained on right now is that he taught me how to make a shelter with nothing more than what nature could give me. I was 10 the year Dad sent me to camp, and I'm old enough now to realize that the woman he'd been bringing around to watch baseball and have a beer with was more than just a friend. And he discovered what I learned years later, that there's no such thing as privacy in a trailer. I didn't want to go. I stomped my feet and called him an asshole and told him he was abandoning me, same as Mama did. Dad just pulled my hat down over my eyes and told me not to kick the boys in the balls and drove off, leaving me holding his old army rucksack and a pile of hurt feelings. Throwing a fit didn't do a thing, and I was never the type for pouting. So I settled in at Camp Little Fish, a place where they taught me who Jesus was, and I found someone I admired a hell of a lot more, Davy Beat. Davy was a counselor, and though he seemed ages older than the rest of the cabin leaders, I found he was only 15 and did the math on my fingers to figure out how old he would be when I could legally get married. And while I harbored that crush for the rest of my life, it deepened into something else on the first day he led a group of us into the forest. Respect. Davy carried a machete in his belt, using it to walk through brush and slice open a wild grapevine as thick as my arm. All of us kids took a drink from the juice dripping at the end. Not quite like something from the store, but somehow better. And then he asked us if we wanted to learn how to stay dry in the rain, warm in the cold, and fed in the middle of nowhere. He had my attention, which was a hard thing to get. I didn't like many people and found less worth talking to. But when Davy spoke, I listened. And that's why I'm not getting soaked right now down to my spine again tonight. I heard thunder today in the mid afternoon, low and rolling, far in the distance. The trees weren't kicking up a fuss yet, so I knew I had a little time. I found a big maple with a split down the middle, a place where 20 or 30 years ago two branches went their separate ways, creating a fort that I can prop a dead limb against. It's just above my head, and I need both hands to get it raised high enough. So I have to drop the walking stick and balance, my bad foot jammed in the sling and snug up against my ass. It's not easy, and I'm shaky when I'm done, limp and pulling onto the ground. I land right where I unearthed the piece I lifted, uncovering grubs, fat and glistening. I would never say that they look good to me, or that I didn't gag once or twice dry, swallowing them. But protein's protein, and I'm going to finish building this thing. I need something to digest other than my own stomach lining. Shh. Hey, Clyde. Sorry, guys. My gut clenches again, angry at being asked to do something once I've let it slumber. But I'm ready this time, and I let it have its way for a minute, kicking and screaming, same as I did when Dad dragged me out of the truck and left me at Camp Little Fish. I hold myself hand over hand and pick up my crutch. It started rubbing a sore spot this morning, a little nub from the curve that reaches around to the soft meat behind my armpit, digging in. It's like wearing the same bra too many days in a row and having the clasp leave a welt where it's gotten cozy against your skin. I knocked off that little knob against a tree and kept going, but all I did was start a new sore just below where the first one started. I stretched for a second, letting all the muscles that have been hunched most of the day take a breath while I leaned against the maple, eyeing everywhere around me for what I can use for the sides of my shelter. Davy taught us how to do this. Prop up the big center pole and then lean smaller branches against the side, tight against each other. The thunder rolls again, closer this time, and I hunch back over my walking stick, scuttling from one piece to the next and tossing them in the general direction of my shelter. I get one side done and the other half up before the first sprinkle hits my nose. So part of the west wall is a shit job, and I don't think Davy would have much nice things to say about it. But I got to get a covering over what I did manage to construct before the rain gets serious about what it's doing. There's a dead pine a ways off, but that looks like a new development. An ash that the boars laid claim to fell across its lengthways, shearing off boughs, slick as a razor blade. It's the best thing that's happened to me since my underwear dried all the way through. The needles aren't dead enough to fall away yet, so I drag the limbs back to the shelter I'm making. They lie across the sticks I propped, like a grass roof that I layer some dead leaves on top of, and not a second too soon. The next bit of thunder is more of a snap than a roll, a loud, brittle noise that I feel in my teeth. I grabbed the last thing I'm going to need, a flat piece of the ash that fell, wide as my hand and about half the length of my arm, and a broken branch of the same tree. I tuck them into my armpit and get back just as the rain starts sliding under the lean to I've made. There's one thing I forgot to add on the list of things I've got: pants, shirt, underwear, bra, and my own hair. I yank it out a few strands at a time, rolling them together in my palms until they're twisted so tight there's nothing going to break them loose. Then I tear out some more, lengthening and thickening the cordage as I roll it until I've got something that can pass for a rope. I'm not Rapunzel and nobody could climb this, but it's good enough for what I need. I take the bit of ash branch and tuck the cordage into a split end, pressing the other against the flat piece. Then I start to spin it. Davy Beat taught me to do this years ago when he asked if anyone knew how to make a fire. I watch him spin a branch against a flat piece of wood, fingers pulling down on a bit of string he knocked through the top, pushing down and spinning at the same time, the sinewy muscles of his arms distracting me for a full minute. This may be where my fascination with boys' arms started, come to think of it. Physics applies no matter where you are in the world, and Davy Beat made fire in the woods with nothing but friction, his face red and arms shaky with effort by the time a bit of smoke rose up. But he did it, then he showed us how. I was the only one that managed to follow his example that day, and I've done it since because it's not a skill you want to lose. I'd never tried it with nothing but grubs and a worm in my stomach and half a foot open to the world, but science is a solid thing, and I get a thin line of smoke just in time, right before my arms are about to give out. I feed it with dead leaves and a puff of my breath, my heart thrilling at the sight of a spark, then the lick of a flame. I'm not going to starve, and I'm not going to be cold, and it's all because of Davy Beat. And the reason why I don't want to think about that is because he's more than likely dead. Davy Bead walked into the Smokies with a full pack and a broken heart, his girl having gone off to college and found something that fit her better than already broken in shoes. I was 12 and ready to show off what I had, packing only tank tops and ripped jeans shorts in my bag for Camp Little Fish a few years before he left. But it was my brain Davy liked. He was 17 by then, running a whole program about trail survival. I signed up for it the day I got to camp, hoping he'd notice me as I stood there uncapping a Sharpie and putting my name big and bold, first one on the poster for his class. He saw me, sure, but it wasn't my boobs that he cared about. Davy was a good guy, and while there were plenty of others who might take a look at something too young to touch, and some that didn't mind taking the risk of touching something that was illegal, all he cared about was my mind and my attitude. Davy started calling me Ass Kicker Ashley the second year I went to Little Fish, when I bashed a fellow camper in the back of the head with a stick for putting a toad in the fire. He said he just did it to see what would happen, so I used the same line of defense, although I could hardly claim surprise at the trickle of blood that he had seeped from behind his ear after my first swing. I also can't blame pure curiosity once the discovery had been made and I took a second swing anyway. The directors would have sent me home, but no one could get a hold of Dad, and I didn't know Mama's phone number, so they had to keep me. I was separated from the other kids, which was fine because they were all a bunch of assholes anyway. That's when Davy took to calling me Ass Kicker Ashley and showed me how to set a snare. So when he saw me come back that third year, all leggy and sunburned and taking my time writing out my name in cursive on his class roster, he smiled and as if I wanted to know what plants I could eat and which ones would kill me in return. I fought down the blush rising in my already burned skin and told him, hell yes. He took the Sharpie from me and scribbled out my last name, writing Ass Kicker in front of my first. That way I know who it is, he said. I was the only one who signed up for that class. Everyone else wanted to take ceramics and something about jewelry. They sent an adult out there with us, whether for the sake of propriety or because the directors were afraid I might have a habit of hitting people with sticks. I don't know. But our escort usually fell asleep under a tree, sitting so still that at one point we came back from a hike to find a snake sunning in his lap. For a week, I had Davy Beats to myself, and while I know I didn't do a good job hiding my childish crush, he never acknowledged it, keeping up a steady stream of bird identification, toxic toads, and what mushrooms I'd better never ever touch unless I wanted them growing out of my spine a week later, and not too good smell coming out of my corpse. He taught me how to track too, then made me turn my back while he walked away, with instructions to yell 3 times if I got freaked out and thought I was lost. He said he'd come for me if that happened, and there were a few times while I tracked him that I wanted to call out, but pride kept it down. That, and I'd spot the next sign, a step or two ahead. I bent twig, a turned leaf, a muddy slip where he didn't get traction. I found him twice. The third time he went down to the creek and circled behind me, pushing me in when I heard his footsteps a second too late. I'd shrieked and splashed him, tickled pink that he'd touch me, even if it was just in fun. We waited for the water to settle and then laid in our bellies on the bank. Davy plucking a fish out with his bare hands, easy as pie. Mama always hated that saying. She said pie is actually pretty hard, especially the crust part. Davy knew everything and could do it all, so when I heard his girl split, I was half elated and half pissed off because I knew how it hurt to be left. I wanted to tell him so, but there was no way to do it. I didn't have his number because the camp was real strict about... Clyde, knock it off! Sorry. I wanted to tell him so, but there was no way to do it. I didn't have his number because the camp was real strict about interactions between campers and counselors, and he lived 2 towns over. The local paper ran a story about him doing a leg of the AT on his own, with a big picture of him smiling in a way that didn't look quite right. No teeth, dimples not popping. I said I was going to cover 2 miles today. I bet I didn't even put in 1. Davy B taught me everything I know about survival, and he never came back out of those woods. So what chance do I have? Okay, guys, that was an awfully long chapter. Hope you enjoyed it. And say goodbye to Punk Clyde, whining in the corner. He should be ashamed. This is my daughter's room. It's a mess. Don't judge me.